Hello YouTubers, Michael Scott, Scotty Man Photo. Thought I'd talk a little bit about beginner's gear for landscape photographers. So if you're new to landscape photography or you're looking to get into landscape photography, what's the basic gear that you need? In short, and I can just go ahead and get right to it and save you the whole video if you don't want to watch it, but it's a camera, a lens, and a tripod. And that's really all you need to get started. Everything else is just going to kind of fall in place. But I think there's really more to it than that, and it's not that simple, but honestly, if you had those three things, just get out there and shoot, and it really doesn't matter whether that's a phone, a DSLR, maybe even a film camera. I mean, just get started, get out there. So, I mean, that's the basics of what you need. Another thing I would say is don't waste money on things that you don't need. And I think you'll find yourself doing that if you're scouring YouTube, you're constantly watching videos like this about what you need to be a landscape photographer. I would simply say this. I mean, you can get sidetracked on a lot of things that you necessarily don't need or you won't use. And so don't waste money on those things. Concentrate on your camera, your lens, your tripod, and worry about the other things later. There are some other things to take into consideration, like where are you going to be shooting? And I think this is kind of depends on your geography. I mean, where are you located? What's in your backyard? What's available to you? Are you going to be shooting seascapes? Are you going to be scaling mountaintops and shooting vistas? So that might help narrow down the search of the things that you're going to need to get started. What I would say though is that what's in your backyard? So think about that, and you may need some things to help capture the images that you're looking for, and that might be a tent, some camping gear if you're going to scale up a mountaintop or a long trail to, capture an image that you're looking for. So those things are also considerations. I mean, there's a lot more than just the camera and the tripod, but at least that'll get you started. Some things I didn't think a lot about early on, I think probably because I was younger, but now I certainly think a lot about them, are comfort items. Knee pads are a good example. I mean, having some knee pads on a rocky scene where you're getting down low and capturing an image, I mean, knee pads come in handy. So those are some really low-level items, not a lot of expense in those, but just comfort items are things to keep in mind too. So kind of back to your location, I mean, if you're going to shoot a lot of waterfalls, you might want to invest in maybe filters. And whereas you might not need filters starting out, or maybe you want to go real basic and instead of a filter kit, just buy a polarizer. I think a polarizer is definitely an asset to any kit, but you could certainly get started without one. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the camera and what does it have to have. All right, so I'm going to recommend a DSLR. You could go with an SLR if you want to get into film, but you could go with whatever you want. The reason I recommend a DSLR is because basically you've got interchangeable lenses. That gives you the ability to change your focal length. And for expansion, different lenses do different things. Depth of field, there's a variety of lenses out there. So having that ability to change lenses, I think is super important. And that's why I recommend a DSLR. But the DSLR that you select, it needs to have the ability, you should be able to go to manual and switch between your shutter speed, aperture, and adjust your ISO. So you got to be able to control the exposure triangle with the camera that you're using. Another thing with the DSLR is it has to be able to shoot RAW. I think shooting RAW images is the way to go. So it certainly gives you more control in post-processing about how you're going to process that image. And it simply captures more detail in the image and gives you more room to process the image. So you need to be able to shoot RAW. Now, another thing, this is not essential, but I've got one on every camera that I have, and even my SLR. I've got an L bracket. And an L bracket is just super handy because when you're capturing an image on a tripod, you can attach that L bracket to that tripod. You can shoot horizontal landscapes, or you can go to portrait style. I mean, and you don't have to kind of mess around with a tripod attachment, because sometimes the camera can kind of shift on you when you're out in the field. So I think an L bracket is just very universal, and there's just many things that you can do with it. So that's something that I mean, if your budget doesn't support it, I mean, you could probably pick up an L bracket on eBay or something for maybe 50 bucks, but depending on the camera, but maybe even cheaper than that. But definitely something to keep in mind. So you've captured all these images, but you've got to have the ability to process them. So you're going to need a computer, obviously, and I think that's everybody realizes that. But you're going to need some kind of editing software. Now, I recommend Lightroom. Lightroom is very easy. It provides a very good catalog for your images so that you can store them, you can review them and look at them. And it also provides a very powerful editing tool. I remember using Capture NX2 for the longest time. And I kind of shied away from Lightroom, and probably because I was just shooting Nikon. I wanted to use the native software with the Nikon, which is Capture NX2. But as time went on, I really, once I started looking at Lightroom, it was just so easy. And I think one of the most important things today about editing software is that Lightroom, the tutorials on YouTube for Lightroom are just everywhere. And as compared to Capture NX2, there's just not a lot out there compared to Lightroom. So I think as far as learning goes and learning that software, you'll definitely have more resources using Lightroom than you would Capture NX2. But there's other software out there that you can use and other storage methods for your photos, and I would encourage you to explore those options. Okay, so the big question, what lens? What lens do you choose if you're only going to have one? I think you can make an entire video on that, but I would make it as simple as I can. I think it depends on the type of photography that you're shooting. If you're out shooting open vistas, then the wide angle is probably going to be the better lens, a 14 to 24, something around that focal length. If you're kind of, maybe you're mixing and matching some kind of close-up images, and maybe some landscapes too, maybe the 24 to 70 might be the way to go. There's just really no right answer on this. I think it just depends, and I think you should base your lens on what's the majority of images that you're interested in capturing. And if that's, the tips of mountaintops and zooming in, maybe that's the 70 to 200, or maybe even a longer focal length. But I think that's really a question that only you can answer. I would say, if I were forced to answer, you're twisting my arm right now and you're, Michael, what lens do I have to have? What's the best one? If you could only have one right now, what would it be? And I would have to say the 24 to 70. I just think it's the most versatile lens. It's at least the Nikon version here, 24 to 70 2.8. It's just super sharp. It's a great lens, and the focal length is perfect. You can capture good landscape images, but you can also capture portraits and other things. There's other uses for that lens. But the point is, 24 millimeters is a pretty good focal length for landscape photography. So I think you can kind of use your editing software and go in and see which lens you use more often. But I think there's no doubt for me, hands down, it's probably 24 to 70, and the close second is the 14 to 24. And I don't use the 70 to 200 a whole lot, but when you need it, it's nice to have it. All right, the next big one, tripods. There's no doubt that an entire series of videos could be made on tripods. But if you want my advice, and simply put, buy nice, buy once. That's my advice. Truth is, you're going to go through a number of tripods, and I certainly have a nice collection of them myself. If your budget doesn't support an expensive tripod, well, get the tripod that gets you out there. A tripod's better than no tripod in landscape photography, so any tripod will do. And yeah, there's cheap tripods out there. You can pick them up for less than $100. And maybe you'll find a happy medium, something $150 or so. Get a decent tripod. I mean, you could pick up a decent Manfrotto tripod, maybe 100, 150. That'll certainly do the job and get you out there shooting. And that's what's important. Get out there and shoot. You can save for a better tripod and purchase that later, but get something that gets you out there started. But I would say is this, if you do buy nice, buy once, because eventually, I think if you're going to stick with landscape photography and you're going to be doing this for a number of years, you're going to find yourself wanting a very, very nice tripod. And I think it really, for me, it comes down to two tripods. So one is a lightweight travel tripod, and you have to have a compromise in these tripods. When you're going lightweight, you know, it may not be rock solid, but this Gitzo is probably one of the better tripods I've seen as far as stability and being lightweight. So it's a good compromise. And I do a lot of hiking and backpacking into areas, and this is my go-to for that. However, when I'm not doing that, and I'm out at a lakeside or somewhere with a short hike maybe, then I'm gonna go a little bit bigger and a little bit more stable with a tripod. And I do like the gear head, but I would recommend starting out with a ball head. And I think good thing about these Gitzo tripods, and many tripods like it, is that you can change these heads. I could take this head off. I've got a good ball head, and I use that for different things, but I like the gear head. But the ball head is great too, but having the ability to just change heads is nice too. It's just expandable. You can do more with a versatile tripod than you can with something you can't do a lot with, something a little bit less expensive. But definitely two tripods, at least for me anyway, really work out well. All right, another consideration on the tripod is this: center columns. Now, I don't have a center column on my larger tripod, but I do on my travel tripod. And I think that's just a sacrifice that you make with the travel tripod. But it depends really on how much weight you want to carry. You can certainly get these without center tripods. They don't have to be that tall. I'm 6'5", I like a tall tripod, but I don't mind getting down lower either. So, but this is handy. Now, I follow a fellow photographer. He's a great photographer too, very skilled, very knowledgeable. His name's Glenn from Sniper Photography. And I know Glenn's watching, and I know what Glenn would say: Michael, pull out a saw and saw off that center tripod and install some sword-sized spikes on the tips of the legs. So I'm going to get to that, Glenn. I'm going to do that one day, but for now I'm going to hold on to this little travel tripod because I really like this, and it's pretty versatile. But I would say though that the spikes are nice on the feet, and when you buy a tripod that you can screw these feet off and put on different feet is very nice. Depending on the terrain that you're shooting at, you might prefer the spikes, or you might prefer kind of the general purpose tips on the legs here too. So it just depends. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is bags. I think, again, you can make a whole video just on bags, but the truth is get whatever bag fits your needs. But you need something to kind of haul your gear around. Even if you just have a camera and a lens and a tripod, you're going to need some way to carry this. And certainly if you're hiking anywhere, you know, that might change up things, and you might need a more specialized bag. But what I do recommend is you could buy just a regular hiking bag, and you can get an insert. This is I think it's a small f-stop insert, and basically you can tailor it. You can fit your camera, lens, maybe some cleaning gear, right? Essential item. And other things that you need in here. And you can put this in any kind of bag that you have. And that will also help if you're planning on doing any travel on a plane. You can get that bag down smaller. Plus you can put this in other luggage. I don't like to check. Matter of fact, I've never checked any photography gear on any flight. So that's a consideration. But I think you'll probably go through bags until you find the right one. Personally, I do like this f-stop bag, and f-stop Talopa, just a super hiking backpacking bag. And I'll do more on this later. We'll talk more about bags, but a shoulder strap bag is an awesome bag for kind of just getting that gear on the go and maybe street photography. So really, again, it depends on the type of photography you do. But as a landscape photographer, I think you're going to need some kind of backpack. And I would recommend starting out with, like I said, a hiking backpack of some type, Osprey or something, and maybe just camera inserts. And you can put multiple inserts in those bags too, depending on the size of your bag. Oh yeah, by the way, I almost forgot, cable release. I consider this to be an essential item, although you don't need it right off the bat. You could just use your camera and basically set a timer and take the picture. But what that'll do is that this will just it's less motion blur in your image. It's less chance to shake the camera. You're not touching the camera. You're simply pushing the shutter remotely. And I think, you know, that's pretty important to me anyway. Well, that's it. I hope you liked the video. I hope you got something out of it. I was really, the whole purpose of this was really to help the new photographer, the aspiring landscape photographer, kind of decide what gear do I really need to start out in. And these are just some of my thoughts and ideas and recommendations, but hopefully you got something out of it. But anyway, hey, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. But if you like the video, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing. Maybe hit that bell icon to be notified of any future videos that I post. And as always, if I don't see you down the road, maybe I'll see you on the trail.